Today is a little bit different. I am doing this video to beg and plead a couple things of you. For one group, I have 2 requests. For another group, I have 1 request that applies to everyone who's seeing this. And if you're seeing this, it also applies to everyone you know. Right now, the story of the Kansas City Chiefs fans who died is pretty much everywhere, and it's a tragic story. I have my own kind of pictures in my head of how it happened. I think it was not intentional in any way. I think this was just what's happening to people all across the country right now. From the first time I heard the story, I had this image in my head that these guys had a great night together among friends. Their team won. They would have been in a fantastic mood. At the end of the night, one decided to pass out on his couch. The others left. And just in my imagination, they decided to stop and sit out in the backyard and look up at the sky. Winter skies before snow are so beautiful. There's a crispness in the air, and I just picture them relaxed and looking up at the stars, talking to each other, falling asleep, and passing without pain or fear. It's just what I see when I think about it. I guess it's the way I make sense of 2 of them being on the ground. It's just stargazing after a good night. Fentanyl is in everything.
The drug landscape has changed. Illegal fentanyl has made its way into the drug supply. And it's a danger you might not see coming. A synthetic opioid up to 50 times stronger than heroin, up to 100 times stronger than morphine. It only takes the tiniest amount to cause a fatal overdose. A fraction of a raindrop, or 3 grains of salt. Your drugs don't come with an ingredients list. Although fentanyl is being mixed into almost every kind of drug, you wouldn't be able to see it, or smell it, or taste it. Fentanyl is one of the most common drugs involved in overdose deaths. Know the dangers. Learn the facts about fentanyl and ways to protect yourself at cdc.gov/stop-overdose.
It's apparently fairly cheap to produce, and it is dangerous. It is scary. And I am not someone who is like a anti-drug person. I think there's medicinal value in most drugs. Things like Molly were created for a psychological benefit. Cocaine has been used for thousands of years for all kinds of illnesses, and it works. It works well. Someone very close to me had a severe mental disorder. She was bipolar and off and on diagnosed with DID, which back then was called multiple personalities. And even today, there's debate on whether it really exists. So her main psychiatrist diagnosed her with multiple personalities, but the general medical community really considered it either malingering or some other dissociative disorder. It wasn't taken seriously. She wasn't really treated for it, but she was treated for the bipolar, which was then manic depression. It didn't work well. She was on every medication you can imagine over the years. Often she was a zombie, just sitting and drooling and unable to do anything. And there were some things that worked better than others. Xanax was really helpful over the years, but then she started using coke. She started self-medicating, and it did not work on her brain the way it works in others. It was a miracle. It literally saved my life. I know without something to get her under control, she could have killed me. So I am a big supporter of at least research into the medicinal uses for cocaine. It was amazing watching how one puff and she's back to herself. You know, she's not raging or cutting or manic. It was just this instantaneous thing, but it did bring around people with normal brain chemistry who were using coke and were addicted to both coke and crack and other substances. And that caused a lot of problems in our lives, including one of my sexual assaults was a direct result of her having her crackhead friends over. But in her brain, her unique brain chemistry, her unique little misfiring synapses, it did something that just calmed her and brought her back to being herself. It was wonderful. And I think it could do miraculous things for a lot of people if it were properly researched and distributed and monitored. And then there's weed, weed is another miracle plant. I live with chronic pain. I am part of a lot of online groups of people, and it is absolutely extraordinary to see how much lives can be changed and helped through the use of marijuana. I don't think that weed is as safe as proponents suggest, especially on young brains. I think my husband smoked a lot from his teen years through his 20s into his 30s, and now he doesn't smoke because it's not allowed on the job. It doesn't have the effect of like alcohol. You don't get a lot of, domestic violence or bar fights or speeding and crashing into buildings that are directly connected to alcohol with weed. Most people who smoke just sit around and enjoy themselves. I never wanted to try it in my teens because I'm kind of a control freak mentally. I need to be aware of my surroundings and in control of my mind. And I've always struggled with my weight. So I would see all my friends who were basically just dumbed down and giggling and eating. Munchies, it's a real thing. I personally feel like the creator, the earth, God, whatever you want to call it, provided what we need. Whether that is opium or marijuana or cocaine. All over the world and throughout all human history, there are natural plants that help with pain and illness and injury. The earth has given us what we need. And there are ways to use them responsibly. Unfortunately, that's not usually human nature. People do get addicted and they do cause problems. They do destroy lives. They do take lives when used inappropriately. But I don't really see Oxycontin and fentanyl and morphine and Vicodin and Suboxone and stuff as any safer or better than plants. So I'm very in favor of medicinal research. I have never tried recreational drugs. The first time I tried marijuana, I was in my mid-30s. A friend of mine had stage 4 stomach cancer and was on medicinal marijuana and convinced me to try it for my back. For me, it made me a little dizzy and a little nauseous, and that was it. There was no pain relief, and it was a very unpleasant experience. But I know a lot of people who could not survive without it. There are people intentionally buying synthetic fentanyl for recreation or self-medicating due to a lack of pain treatment. But most of the deaths I'm aware of have been people who didn't know that they were using fentanyl. Many people are finding fentanyl and increasingly xylazine cut into drugs they are familiar with and comfortable with, things they feel a certain level of safety. But illicit drugs aren't cookie cutter. It's not like Starbucks or McDonald's where you're guaranteed the exact same thing every time you go. You never know what you're going to get when you buy street drugs. There are a lot of issues around addiction, around incarceration and treatment and morality, all of that. It doesn't matter. When it comes to right now, life or death, we have to treat the person. We have to take care of the person. Narcan saves lives. I think for most people, their moral compass would say, save the life, deal with the other issues later. There are people that are full-blown junkies who aren't going to turn down an 8-ball just because it might be cut with fentanyl. They would much rather take the risk than see it go to waste. I have seen people, licking carpet and picking up the smallest imaginable grains with absolute desperation. So for them, it's not going to stop them. They're not going to invest in test strips. They're going to use it because it's in front of them, because they have the opportunity to use and they are addicted, and what they care about is that immediate fix. But even among them, having the knowledge that it's cut with fentanyl might encourage them to have Narcan with them or with a friend who's around to make sure they don't die. For people who use recreationally, who might smoke weed on the weekends or do a line of coke on vacation, and there are a lot of people who use but don't necessarily abuse. People who partake recreationally who are not addicts. I think investing in test strips is a damn good idea for that group of people.
You bought some drugs? Don't worry, we're not cops. We just don't want you to die. Here's how to use a fentanyl test strip so you don't die. Here's what you're gonna need. Water, your substance, fentanyl test strip, and something you can stir with. Step 1, you're gonna fill a container with some water. For this, you can use a cup or a cap of a water bottle. Fill your container with about 15 milliliters of water, which is about a tablespoon. Or you can even use the bag that the test strips come in. Next, pour in some of your substance. If you are testing MDMA or meth, you should test about 10 milligrams, but all other drugs require about 50 milligrams to be tested. And then mix it until it's fully dissolved. And if you have pills, you're gonna wanna test every individual pill. Crush the pill, and then shake it so it's thoroughly mixed. Now's the fun part. Open up your package and take out your test strip. The side with the little blue triangles is the side you're going to put into the water. Dip the strip into the water for at least 10 seconds. Take it out of the water and wait about 60 seconds. Now you got your results. 2 lines means no fentanyl, but 1 line, that means your substance most likely has fentanyl in it. False negatives absolutely can happen, which is why it's super important to always carry Narcan close by. Stay safe out there.
If you are using any kind of recreational drug, please invest in test strips. They are cheap. Test strips are around $5 to $10 for a pack of 5. And if you do use recreationally, have them. Get a pack. Use the pack. When you're buying your product, make sure you test. Make sure you know what's in it. And if there is fentanyl, say no. Walk away. It will encourage dealers not to sell this crap, to make sure that what they have is cleaner and at least not cut with fentanyl. People are dropping like flies. Last summer, there were 2 instances where I had to call police because of unconscious men in my apartment complex parking lot. And then there was a third guy who was barely conscious, kind of in and out, who was actually on my doorstep. I thought he was on heroin at first because of the body movement, but it looks like fentanyl has a very similar effect. I have heard dozens of stories of people who overdosed and almost died, and a few who did die because fentanyl was in something else. I don't get the logic. If you're a drug dealer, you want your customers to be return customers. Drug dealers have always relied on addiction to bring people back in. The goal isn't to kill them, but, apparently they don't care. There are people out there who just do not care about the consequences as long as they're making a profit. I think it should be noted that test strips are unfortunately illegal in some areas. I tried to find a precise list and I was unsuccessful. The only place I found the states actually listed had Washington, where I know they are legal, listed as an illegal state, and Iowa, who has been holding on very tightly to keeping them illegal, does not appear on the list of illegal states. So I can't really call that list reliable. Most states seem to be working on legislation. It's an old anti-drug paraphernalia law that's on the books and really doesn't have much relevance to the life-saving potential the test strips hold. If they are illegal in your area, you can still buy them online, and you can probably also find them from health and safety advocacy groups in your area. Like anything, test strips are not 100%. There can be false positives, and you can get the chocolate chip cookie effect and have it not show up when it is present. But it is a very important and legitimate harm reduction option.
The difference between a fatal drug overdose and survival can come down to this fentanyl testing strip. But states have yet to reach a consensus on their legality. The testing strip is used to detect fentanyl, a deadly synthetic opioid often laced in illicit substances, like heroin. As overdose deaths from the drug rise nationwide, so has the call to decriminalize these strips. The CDC recommends them as a harm reduction strategy. Here's how they work. Mix a small amount of any dissolvable drug with water in a clean container. The test strip is then dipped into the solution for around 15 seconds and allowed to sit flat on a surface for 2 to 5 minutes. A single pink line indicates a positive result, while 2 pink lines is a negative result for fentanyl. Rhode Island first decriminalized the strips in 2018, and at least 20 states have followed, passing bills to no longer classify the strips as illegal drug paraphernalia, many with bipartisan support. It's a shift that has advocacy groups nationwide hopeful.
So I personally keep Narcan in my trunk in the first aid kit, and in my house I have 2 sets. Narcan is pretty expensive. It's about $45, but almost every state has some program where you can get it free. I'm in Washington and I got mine free. I will add a link to a site that will help guide you to your state, or you can just Google it. Almost all the states have some program to access free Narcan. You don't have to be a drug user or an addict to use and keep Narcan with you. It's just something that belongs in your first aid kit at this point. You don't know if you're going to have somebody collapse in front of you at a stoplight. You don't know if somebody is going to overdose in a grocery store. My request, my plea to you is, if you use recreational drugs, you have test strips with you. If you use recreational drugs or you don't use recreational drugs, if you exist in the world, I really beg you to have Narcan. It really is just a first aid tool at this point. It is something worth having with you at all times, whether you use or not. And I think that is so important. People who aren't involved in drugs don't feel like this is their problem. And to some extent, it's not. But if you see somebody and you could save their life, you do it, right? I mean, if you have that ability, you have the responsibility to do so. So I guess if you don't want that responsibility, don't get the Narcan, but I feel like you'll end up with the responsibility for their death to some extent. It's obviously not your fault that someone else made decisions that led them to this, but when it comes down to that moment that they can die or they can be saved, that might be up to you. People have a lot of opinions about drug use and addiction. If I could smoke weed and be functional in my life, I would. I spent a decade of my life taking 6 Vicodin and 3 morphine a day. And if I could have used something natural, I really would have preferred that. And I'm now on a different medication that, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't be able to dress myself or function without it. My pain level is high most days, and I need to be on medication and neuroblockers just to function. But if I responded better to marijuana, believe me, that's what I would be using instead. If you have the option to use a natural plant, that just seems obvious to me. But people do it for fun too. It's never appealed to me. I have a lot of addiction in my family. I don't want to get addicted. So I just have never tried most things. And like I said, the marijuana thing, it was not wanting to lose control of my thoughts. Munchies and giggling, absolutely last things I wanted when I was a teen. So I didn't try anything. I smoked cigarettes, which I'm still struggling with. I drank until one day I woke up and had a craving for beer, and I just stopped right then. The fear of addiction outweighed all social pressure. I am of the DARE generation, which is one of the most unsuccessful programs in American history. But I gotta say, I never felt peer pressure. In my teens, I hung out with the bad crowd. A lot of drug use was going on, mostly marijuana, acid, and then occasionally there would be a little bit of something else. Shrooms, coke, but it was mostly pot. I had a lot of people who knew I didn't smoke and really wanted to be the first person to get me stoned. So there was always this open offer of free weed if I wanted it. At school, I was warned about peer pressure. And out in the real world, in the wild, when I said I don't smoke, consistently the response I got was, okay, more for me. And that was it. There was never, ever a hint of pressure to do anything I didn't want to do. Maybe I got lucky. Maybe I just don't care what other people think as much as some people do, especially as a teen. I know a lot of people place their self-worth and their identity into what other people think of them. And I never did that. I couldn't have done that. I I wouldn't have survived if my self-worth was based on the way others treated me. I wouldn't have gotten through. So I was blessed with a natural sense of self, of feeling comfortable in my own skin. I felt self-conscious about my weight and all kinds of things as a teenager, but my self-worth was pretty well protected. I didn't feel like my body reflected who I was as a person, but I wasn't happy with how my body looked at the time. Now I'd kill for that body, but that's a whole other story. So I just wanted to stop in quickly and beg and plead, because you can save a life, maybe your own, maybe someone else's. Test strips are cheap. It's worth knowing what you're getting. It is worth making sure that you know what you're putting in your body, and that if there are traces of fentanyl or anything you don't want, do not buy it, and do not feel pressured to buy it. Just say no to fentanyl, kids. You're the customer. The customer's always right? They want to sell. So if enough people reject it, they will change what they're putting out. I don't know exactly how this is working right now, why it's in everything, who's distributing it, who's making it, but God, it's dangerous. I was actually offered fentanyl at one point by a doctor, a pain management specialist, but it was shortly after Tom Petty had just died with the fentanyl patch, and I turned it down because fentanyl seemed scary to me, and it's only gotten worse. So with Narcan, you do like a fire extinguisher. You want to know how to use it before you have to use it. Make sure you go over the instructions when you buy it.
911, what's your emergency?
All right, stay safe, listen to your instincts, and I will be back soon. Bye. Here we have Michael.
Hi.
Do you have anything to say, good or bad? What is the good that you experienced from using weed from your teens through your early 40s?
It calms me, it makes me laugh, it's an entertainment value, and it helps with my pain when I have pain in like my back.
Yeah, which the pain
And
value
other
has
joints.
increased over the years.
Yep.
Okay, so what is the negative that you've experienced?
Short-term and long-term memory loss.
So if you could go back in time, would you have started smoking weed? And what age would you have started smoking?
I'd probably go a little older than when I started.
Well, how old were you when you started?
17.
Okay, that's not young, but
No, but I would have probably started in my early 20s.
yeah. Wait until the
Instead.
brain is fully developed.
Exactly.
Okay. So when I picked him up from work, I asked him that question and then wanted to get his answer on video when we stopped. And I asked the brilliant question of, can you please remind me that you have short-term memory loss? Oh, yeah, that was one of the worst questions I've ever asked in my life, or requests. Please remind me of your memory loss. All right.